Just a few years ago, the Boston Celtics were viewed as a team that was a future dynasty. They were viewed as a team that could legitimately win the NBA championship and at least compete for it for the next 5 years or so. For example, when they had Isaiah Thomas, when they had Kyrie Irving, and then when they also had Gordon Hayward, and then when they had Kemba Walker. I'm not going to lie, over the past few years, the Boston Celtics have definitely been regressing. And that's led me to make this video where I'll be discussing the rise and the fall of the Boston Celtics, as well as just their future. Before we get into the video, I just want to say my bad for missing the last few days. It's not going to happen again. I just wasn't feeling that well, but I would appreciate you if you drop a like on this video, as it does help my channel grow. Subscribe to my channel if you want more NBA content like this, because I post every single day. And if you want to help reach my goal of 1,500 subscribers, also drop a comment on this video, as it does help my channel grow, and play that intro. We start in the 2016-2017 season. This is a season where going into it, most people had the Celtics as the 3rd to 5th seed in the conference, not as legit title contenders, but surprisingly they shocked everyone to finish with the 1st seed in the Eastern Conference with a 53-29 record. They were led by Isaiah Thomas, who had one of the more remarkable seasons of the past few years, as he averaged 29 points and 6 assists, shooting 46% from the field. He was a top 5 MVP candidate this year, and he was just really fun to watch him play on the Celtics. The only problem was that although the Celtics were really good in the regular season, basically everyone knew that they were one of the weakest number 1 seeds ever, and most people thought that the Cleveland Cavaliers would absolutely demolish them whenever they faced them, and people even thought teams like the Wizards could beat them. And going into the playoffs, they beat the Atlanta Hawks in 6 games, then they would beat the Washington Wizards in 7 games in a really close series. Then in the conference finals, they would get gentlemen swept by the Cleveland Cavaliers. But in game 2 of that series, Isaiah Thomas got a hip injury that would leave him out the whole series. People really didn't think too much of it when it happened, but it would prove to be a really serious injury down the road. In the 2017 offseason, the Celtics got real busy, as they ended up signing the Utah Jazz's star player in Gordon Hayward to a max contract for 4 years. This was a huge signing since Hayward was an all-star level player. Then surprisingly, they traded their superstar point guard in Isaiah Thomas to their rivals in the Cleveland Cavaliers in exchange for the Cavaliers star guard and Kyrie Irving, who demanded a trade because he wanted to play on his own team, be the best player. You can't do that with LeBron on your team. This was obviously a really big trade, and most people had this as a win-win for both teams. Also, during the NBA draft, they traded their number 1 pick to the Philadelphia 76ers in exchange for the 3rd pick. With the 3rd pick, they selected Jason Tatum, who we all know is now a future star. Well, he already is a star, but he was a pretty good rookie, and it was a smart move to make. Going into the season, lots of people thought that the Celtics could legitimately beat the Cavaliers, but sadly in their first game of the season, Gordon Hayward would have one of the worst injuries in NBA history, as he would snap his leg going up for an alley-oop, and he would be out for the rest of the season. And even without Hayward, the Celtics did pretty good, as they finished the season as the 2nd best team in the conference with a 55-27 record. But during the last quarter of the year, Kyrie Irving went out with a season-ending injury, meaning during the playoffs, their main players were going to be guys like Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Terry Rozier, and Al Horford. And in the playoffs, a lot of people thought they would lose in the first round to the Milwaukee Bucks, but they would beat them in a close 7 games. And then in the second round, everyone thought the Philadelphia 76ers would beat the Boston Celtics, because a lot of people had the Sixers going all the way to the NBA Finals, even over LeBron James and the Cavaliers. But the Celtics were surprised the world again and defeat them in just 5 games. In the series, Tatum really showed his potential as a star, as he averaged 23 points, shooting 52% from the field. Then in the conference finals, a lot of people thought the Celtics, who were basically just a team filled with LeBron James and a bunch of G League players, would still beat the Celtics, and respectfully, they did. But the Celtics only lost in 7 games, and they only lost because LeBron was just absolutely crazy in that series. He just went crazy. There's nothing you can do. He literally was averaging 33 points, 9 rebounds, 8 assists, shooting 52% from the field, and even shooting 40% from 3. I was cheering for the Cavs in that series, but I have to be honest, if the Celtics had Kyrie Irving, they definitely are winning that series in 6 games. But during that series, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown showed a lot of promise, as Brown averaged 20 points, shooting 44% from the field, and Tatum averaged 18 points, shooting 50% from the field. After this season, literally everyone was really high on the Celtics, because they were only 1 win from the NBA Finals without their 2 best players. So the next people are thinking like the next season, if the Celtics get a healthy Kyrie, healthy Gordon Hayward, they're definitely going to be a super team and the best team in the Eastern Conference by far. Going into the 2018-2019 season, the Celtics were viewed as legit title contenders, and they were by far the favorites to make it out of the East. It was really obvious that this team needed some adjusting to do, because they really struggled during the regular season, only finishing with a 49-33 record and the 4th seed in the Eastern Conference. But even though they really disappointed a lot of people still had faith in them because of just how talented and deep they were. This was a team of Kyrie Irving, who was an all-star, top 15 player in the NBA, Jason Tatum, who was a rising star, Al Horford, who was a veteran type of player who had star player value because he was just that impactful with his passing, defense, 3-point shooting. They also had Marcus Morris, who's a really good 3-and-D player. They had Marcus Smart, one of the best guard defenders in the league. They had Jaylen Brown, who was a rising star, kind of you could see the potential, but he couldn't fully blossom on this team with this much talent, but he was at least a really good role player. Hayward was really disappointing. He only averaged 11 points, but he did show some signs he could get back to his old form. And their starting guard in last year's playoffs, Terry Rozier, who really balled out, having multiple 20-point games last playoffs. He was their backup point guard, and obviously he was talented if he could do all that. So this was clearly a really talented team, and going to the first round, they would sweep the Indiana Pacers. They're starting to look like they were getting their mojo together. Then in the second round, they would lose to the Milwaukee Bucks in just 5 games. In the series, they just looked out of sorts. Kyrie Irving, who's known as a great postseason player, played absolutely horrible in that series, as he averaged 20 points and 6 assists, but he shot a disgusting 35% from the field and 21% from 3. And Jason Tatum, who was absolutely depended on, he only averaged 12 points, and he shot 36% from the field and 12% from 3. Basically, no one besides Jaylen Brown, Al Horford, and Marcus Morris played well in that series. It was a really disappointing end to their season, and a lot of questions were up in the air for this team, since Kyrie was a free agent, meaning he could just leave the team if he wanted to, and a lot of people put the blame on Kyrie for the team being bad. I don't know if I agree with that, but a lot of people said it was just Kyrie's fault because he was toxic. Plus, he had multiple interviews where he was talking bad about his teammates and things like that, and there were multiple reports about arguments and stuff, so the Celtics did have a lot of questions to answer. So in the 2019 NBA offseason, Kyrie Irving would end up leaving the Boston Celtics to sign with the Brooklyn Nets, but not all hope was lost, as the Celtics would sign all-star guard Kemba Walker, and many people thought that was a really good signing, since Kemba might not necessarily be as great of an individual talent as Kyrie was at that point, but he wasn't a terrible guard. He was still an all-star. He wasn't that much worse than Kyrie at that point, and he would have probably been more of a team player, and people thought he would be a better locker room guy. But then things got really bad when the Celtics lost Al Horford to the Philadelphia 76ers, which was obviously a big loss. So going to the 2019-2020 season, there were a lot of mixed feelings about the Celtics. Most people didn't have them as legit title contenders, but most still had them as one of the better teams in the East. That's exactly what they were, as they finished with a 48-24 record in the shortened season. Jason Tatum absolutely broke out as a star in the NBA, averaging 23 points, shooting 45% from the field and 40% from 3. Jaylen Brown broke out as a player, averaging 20 points, shooting 48% from the field. Even Gordon Hayward had a really good bounce back season, averaging 17 points, shooting 50% from the field. And then Kemba Walker fitted really nicely during the regular season, averaging 20 points. Going into the playoffs, the Celtics were viewed as a team that could potentially make it all the way to the NBA Finals. I should mention the playoffs were being played in the NBA bubble due to Corona. And in the first round, they would beat the Philadelphia 76ers in 4 games, since Philadelphia didn't have Ben Simmons. And then in the second round, they would face the Toronto Raptors, who were the #1 seed, and they would beat the Raptors in a really close 7-game series. Going to the NBA Eastern Conference Finals, they had to face the Miami Heat. And a lot of people thought the Celtics were going to take this series and make it to the NBA Finals, but they ended up losing in 6 games. And I believe in like 3 or 4 of those games, they ended up losing in a really close 15. They like blew like a 15-point lead in like all 4 of their losses. They easily could have went to the finals if like they were coached better or if some players just played better. Regardless, this was a pretty positive season for the Celtics. Going into the 2021 NBA season, most people thought the Celtics were going to have similar success since it was basically the same team, just they don't have Gordon Hayward anymore. But they started off really terrible, as during several parts of the season they weren't even in the playoffs. They ended up finishing with the 7th seed. That was really disappointing. The main reason they did so bad was just because they had a lot of players missing games. Jaylen Brown missed 14 games, Jason Tatum missed 8 games, Marcus Smart missed 24 games, Kemba Walker missed 29 games, along with multiple other players not being healthy. Then when they were on the court together, their chemistry was just off due to the lack of like playing together. But since they were the 7th seed, they had to play in a play-in game. They would beat the Wizards, and then in the first round, they found out Jaylen Brown is out for the rest of the season, and they had to face the #2 seed Brooklyn Nets, who had their super team of Kyrie, Kevin Durant, and James Harden. And to make matters worse, Walker would get injured during Game 2. He was playing pretty horrible before that, but he's still like their second best player probably. Meaning it was just Jason Tatum and a bunch of average to below average players. Celtics were losing 5 games, and going to this offseason, it's pretty clear that they needed some work to do. Now we're finally caught up to the current day, where the Celtics head coach is not Brad Stevens anymore. He now replaced Danny Ainge as the general manager, and now their new head coach is a guy named Sime Aduka. I don't know how to say that. They also lost Evan Fournier in free agency, and they bought out Kemba Walker, and then he went to the Knicks. They just recently signed Dennis Schroeder to a 5-year, $1 million deal, and I think he's like signed for 1 year. I'm not gonna lie, right now it's not looking great for the Celtics. They had so much better teams before. Now they're lacking talent and depth. They're really dependent on their top players. I don't know what's next for their future because they have no cap space right now, and they don't have any great assets to trade outside of Marcus Smart or Jaylen Brown. I don't think they should trade either of them. Celtics are in a pretty tough space, and I just want to talk about how they fell off, because I remember back in 2018, 2019, everyone thought the Celtics would for sure like be championship contenders, or at least have one championship in the next few years, that it would maybe be a dynasty and things like that. But sadly, it just hasn't been like that. They're not in like the worst situation ever, because they still do have Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, who are 2 guys who I think will be superstars, especially Jason Tatum, and I can see Jaylen Brown becoming like a top 12, top 15 player in the NBA. They're not in the worst spot. They're not like the Kings, Timberwolves, anything like that, but they definitely have been disappointed. Anyways, guys, that's it for the video. Let me know what you think about the Celtics fall from greatness. Drop a like on this video, as it does help my channel grow. Subscribe to my channel if you want more NBA content like this. I post every single day. And if you want to help go over 1,000 subscribers, also drop a comment on this video, as it does help my channel grow. And I'm out.